It's funny. Those expiration dates on our food, I mean, they really do have us playing this guessing game, don't they? Like, are we chucking out perfectly good food, or are we taking a chance with, a culinary catastrophe?
Yeah.
You sent in this really fascinating piece, this excerpt from a scientific article called Food Expiration Dates, Advances in Science and Technology. And it goes deep, real deep into the science behind those dates. I'm so psyched to unpack this with you and see what we learn.
Yeah, for sure. It seems like those dates cause so much confusion, right?
Right.
It leads to, a ton of wasted food. The article actually highlights that almost 40% of food in the U.S. ends up in the trash, often because they just don't get those labels.
40%? That's wild. That's a crazy amount. So let's break this down. The article mentions different types of labels, right?
Right.
Use by seems pretty straightforward, but then there's best before or enjoy by. I mean, are those just suggestions, or is there a real difference between them?
There's definitely a difference. And the article really points out that this lack of clarity really adds to the problem. Use by, that one's a safety guideline, right?
Okay.
Usually for things that go bad quickly, like meat and poultry, there's a bigger risk of, harmful bacteria growing after that date.
So use by really does mean use by no questions asked.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, that one's clear. But what about that jar of salsa that's been chilling in my fridge way past its best before date? What's the deal there?
See, that's where the confusion kicks in. Best before usually has to do with quality, not safety.
Okay.
It means the food might start to lose flavor, texture, or maybe some of its nutrients after that date, but it's not necessarily gonna make you sick.
Oh, that makes sense. The article even mentions this can of peas, right? From 2011, that was still totally fine. It really makes you wonder if we're, a little too quick to judge things just based on those dates. But how do they even come up with these dates? I mean, is this some super scientific process, or is it more like trial and error?
It used to be a lot more just watching and waiting,
Right.
Scientists would just store food in different conditions and basically keep track of how long it took to go bad. But now things are way more sophisticated.
Oh, yeah.
Researchers are using data models and algorithms to predict how microbes will grow based on stuff like temperature, humidity, even what the food is actually made of.
Wow. So they're using big data to predict how food will age. That's impressive. But as the article points out, those printed dates, they only tell part of the story, right?
Yeah, exactly. The whole journey a food goes through after it leaves the factory, like shipping, storage, even your fridge at home, it can really impact its actual shelf life. And the article, it really stresses how important temperature control is.
We all know we're supposed to keep, perishable stuff refrigerated, but I mean, does a few degrees really make that much of a difference?
A bigger difference than you might think. The article mentions a study. It showed that milk left out at 85 degrees Fahrenheit for just 1 hour is the same as leaving it in the fridge for 3 days. So even small temperature changes during shipping or storage, they can really shorten a product's shelf life.
Wow. Okay. That's a little concerning, actually. Makes you realize those expiration dates are just kind of a snapshot, a moment in time. But the article does offer some hope, right, for the future. It talks about these cutting-edge technologies that could give us a way more accurate idea of how fresh food really is.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
One of the coolest things, definitely, is pathogen-detecting sensors. These tiny sensors can actually tell if harmful bacteria are present, like E. coli and Salmonella.
Wait, so they can actually tell you if your food is contaminated? How does that even work?
Imagine a tiny alarm system for bad bacteria.
Okay.
These sensors, they use fluorescence. Basically, they light up when they touch specific pathogens. So you could scan, say, a package of chicken and know right away if it's safe to eat.
That is incredible. So instead of going by a date that was printed, weeks or months ago, we can have real-time info about our food safety. It's almost like having a food scientist in your pocket.
That's the whole idea.
Wow.
And it's not just about safety either. The article also talks about other technologies like luminescence spectroscopy, which can figure out how fresh produce is based on the light it gives off.
Light? You mean shining a flashlight on your spinach and being like, yep, this is good?
No.
I mean, that sounds like science fiction.
I know, right? It might sound futuristic, but it's based on real science. As food goes bad, its molecular structure changes, and those changes affect how it interacts with light. So researchers are working on ways to measure these tiny changes and turn them into a freshness reading.
That's amazing. So instead of those vague best before dates, we could have personalized freshness reports for everything in our fridge.
Exactly. Imagine like smart labels that change color as food ages, or apps that tell you exactly how much shelf life is left. It could totally change how we shop for and eat food.
This is blowing my mind. This feels like we're on the edge of a food freshness revolution.
Yeah, it's definitely an exciting time, and the impact these technologies could have is huge, right? We could significantly cut down on food waste, improve safety, and just like empower people to make better choices about their food.
Makes me wonder, with all this high-tech wizardry coming our way, will we even need those printed expiration dates anymore?
That's a great question, and it brings us to some even bigger questions about like our whole relationship with food and how these technologies might change it.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's huge. But before we go there, I'm curious about something. The article mentioned the can of peas from 2011. Do you really think it was safe to eat after all that time?
Well, canned stuff is usually made to last a long time. But even then, there are limits, right?
So what's the verdict? Would you risk it?
I think the important thing to remember is that even with all these advancements, our senses are still our best tool. If something looks, smells, or tastes weird, it's probably best to play it safe.
Yeah, that's a good point. Sometimes the simplest way is the best way. But it is super interesting to think about how these technologies could change how we think about food freshness and safety in the future.
Absolutely. And as these technologies keep developing, we'll need to think about the ethical side of things too. Like, how do we make sure everyone can benefit from these innovations? How do we prevent them from creating new kinds of inequality?
Those are important questions for sure. It seems like we've only just started to explore this topic.
Yeah, definitely.
It's really fascinating.
Yeah, it's like a whole new world of possibilities opening up. And speaking of new worlds, the article also mentions something you might not expect in a conversation about food freshness.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's that?
Blockchain.
Blockchain. I usually think of that with cryptocurrency, not like my grocery list.
Right.
What does blockchain have to do with keeping my food fresh?
It's all about tracking. Like, blockchain can keep a record of every single step a food takes, from the farm all the way to your plate. And I don't just mean location. Imagine a system that tracks the temperature, the humidity, how it's handled at every single point along the way.
Wow. Okay. So like if a truck carrying my avocados gets stuck in traffic on a super hot day, that info gets logged on the blockchain.
Exactly. That's it. We'd have like a way more detailed and transparent record of the conditions a food has been through, you know. That could help us figure out its real shelf life instead of relying on a generic best buy date that doesn't consider what actually happened to it.
That would be a total game changer. Instead of wondering if like that milk went bad because my fridge was acting up, I could just check its blockchain record and see if it was like sitting on a loading dock in the sun for 3 hours.
Precisely. And this kind of super detailed data, it could also revolutionize food recalls. Imagine being able to pinpoint exactly where contamination happened and only removing those products instead of having these huge recalls that just create even more waste.
Right, right. It makes so much sense. But is this even doable on a large scale? Like, are we going to be scanning QR codes on our apples anytime soon?
The technology is actually already being tested in different parts of the world.
Wow.
Of course, there are like hurdles, right? Cost, getting everyone on the same page, getting people to actually use it. But I really think it's just a matter of time before these systems are everywhere.
It makes me wonder what, like, going to the supermarket will be like in the future. Will we be swiping our phones over everything to check its blockchain history?
Yeah.
Will our fridges have, like, built-in blockchain scanners?
I know, it's a pretty wild thought. Imagine a world where you can see the whole history of your food just by scanning it, like where it came from, how it was grown, every condition it's been exposed to.
It would definitely take the guesswork out of grocery shopping.
Yeah.
But beyond just the technology, it feels like there's a deeper shift happening here, a move toward more transparency and accountability in our food system.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about giving consumers more information, more control.
Yeah.
Imagine a world where you can choose your food, not just based on the brand or the price, but on its environmental impact, how ethically it was sourced, and its actual freshness.
That's a really powerful vision. It makes me think about the other side of things, too. If we have all this info about how our food was produced and handled, will we, like, value it more? Will we waste less of it?
That's the big question, right? At the end of the day, technology is just a tool. It's up to us to use it in a smart way and to be more mindful about our relationship with food.
That's a great point. It feels like this deep dive has taken us on quite a journey, from the science behind food spoilage to how blockchain could change our whole food system.
And it all comes back to that basic question. How can we use this knowledge to make better choices, waste less, and just enjoy our food more confidently and with more appreciation?
Speaking of enjoyment, let's go back to those other ways of figuring out freshness that we talked about earlier. We talked about the high-tech solutions like sensors and spectroscopy, but what about just, good old-fashioned sensory evaluation? Using our eyes, our noses, our taste buds to figure out the quality of our food.
Oh, yeah, that's super important. The article emphasizes that even with all this fancy technology, our senses are still our most valuable tool.
It's like we have built-in freshness detectors.
Mm.
But are we losing touch with those instincts as we become more and more reliant on technology?
There's definitely a risk of that. We've gotten so used to depending on dates and labels that we might be forgetting how to trust our own judgment.
It's fascinating to think about how all this could change how we think about food,
Yeah.
We've been talking about making food last longer, but maybe that's not even the right question to ask.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there. Maybe we need to rethink this whole obsession with perfect, pristine food that stays fresh forever.
Right. Is that really what we should be aiming for?
Yeah.
Have we lost sight of, the natural way food is produced and consumed?
Our modern lifestyle, it's all about instant gratification, right? Everything's available all the time. We want everything to be convenient and last forever. But when it comes to food, that can kind of disconnect us from reality.
It's like we're trying to control nature, force it to do what we want. But food, it's a living thing. It grows, it matures, and eventually it decays.
And that decay, it's not always a bad thing. Think about all those amazing fermented foods. They rely on that controlled spoilage to get those unique flavors and textures.
Oh, that's so true. Kimchi, sauerkraut, yogurt, they're all gone bad in a good way.
Exactly. It really challenges our idea of what spoiled even means. Sometimes those natural processes can actually make food taste better and even be more nutritious.
So maybe we need to look at it differently. Instead of being afraid of food spoilage, we could see it as a natural part of the cycle.
It's about understanding the different ways food can spoil and knowing when to trust your own senses. Sometimes a little wilting or discoloration is totally fine, but other times it's a sign that something's really gone bad.
It's like learning a whole new language, the language of food. We need to relearn what's normal and what's not, to trust our gut and not just toss things out right away.
The article mentioned how people are so anxious about wasting food and how that often drives what they do. We feel bad throwing food away, but we're also scared to eat anything past its prime.
It's like we're stuck between feeling guilty and feeling scared.
Yeah.
But maybe all these new technologies can help us find a better way.
Right. If we know for sure how fresh our food is, we can make smarter choices about when to eat it, when to preserve it, and when it's actually time to compost it.
It's not just about making it last longer. It's about, understanding the whole life cycle of food and appreciating every part of it.
Exactly. Imagine a world where we waste less food, where we're okay with the natural changes in freshness, and where we feel more connected to where our food comes from.
That's a beautiful thought. And it feels like we're starting to move in that direction. This deep dive has been so eye-opening, and I think it's made us really rethink those dates on our food and our whole relationship with food in general.
It's been an amazing conversation, and I hope it's encouraged people to question what they think they know and be open to the ever-changing world of food knowledge.
I think so too. So the next time you're looking in your fridge, don't just focus on those dates. Look at the food, use your senses, trust your gut.
And remember, the best meals are often the ones that embrace the beauty of imperfection.
Couldn't have said it better myself. On that note, we'll leave you to enjoy those thoughts. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and bon appétit.